All right, we're now talking about our final two sections for anatomy and physiology first semester, finishing up with the nervous system. And the first chapter, which we're covering of the two, is chapter 15 on the autonomic nervous system. And the objectives for which we should be able to have resolved by the time we finish this section, you should be able to list the similarities and differences between the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system, compare and contrast lower motor neurons in the somatic nervous system, I keep wanting to say sympathetic nervous system, but somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system, and describe how the two neuron chain in the autonomic nervous system facilitates communication and control, and describe how the central nervous system hierarchy to describe the CNS in our hierarchy that controls the autonomic nervous system. So starting with the somatic nervous system, and you need to know this on the exam, that is consciously perceived or controlled processes. The somatic sensory portion detects signals from special senses like the vision, hearing, equilibrium, smell, and taste, and from skin and proprioceptors. The somatic motor portion sends signals from the CNS to the skeletal muscles, and includes the voluntary movements that involve the cerebrum and reflexive movements that involve the brainstem and spinal cord. Again, you have to know all that. It's going to be on an exam in some capacity. Now, with that somatic nervous system, then we have here at the spinal cord here, we have our posterior root ganglion, we have our anterior root here, and of course the somatic neuron basically detects some stimuli here at the nerve signal from the special senses, vision, hearing, equilibrium, smell, and taste, like we just mentioned, and the skin and proprioceptors in the joints and muscles, sends that info to the posterior root ganglion to the spinal cord, and then information is going to be sent to the anterior root for the somatic motor neuron, transmitting nerve signals to the skeletal muscle. And with the autonomic nervous system, which you absolutely have to know this for your exam as well, this slide essentially, at least the first 3 points and 5.5 will be on that exam. Also called the autonomic motor or visceral motor system. The processes are regulated below the conscious level. It's involuntary, or unconscious, if you will. It transmits signals from the CNS to the heart, smooth muscle, and the glands. Responds to the visceral sensory inputs like the blood vessels. Now, those sensory neurons are not considered part of the autonomic nervous system. That said, it also functions to maintain homeostasis, maintain that balance, the place where your body likes to get back to, where it can actually heal and rest and be prepared again for the next stressor that comes along. It keeps conditions inside the body within optimal ranges. So with our autonomic nervous system then, we have in this case, we're getting a visceral sensory neuron detecting stimuli associated with blood vessels and the viscera. We're looking at the lungs here, the smooth muscle, the bronchi of the lungs. And we have sensory receptors in the viscera, like the stretch receptors and chemoreceptors in the lungs there. And information is going to come up here. And we're going to get to the autonomic ganglion here. And here's our preganglionic autonomic motor neuron, where it's going to first meet there. And then it's going to be brought up to the spinal cord. And the spinal cord then is going to transfer it or transmit it to that preganglionic autonomic motor neuron. It's going to come the ganglionic autonomic motor neuron here, and then innervate when it needs to for the lungs. And for lower motor neurons, you will need to know the lower motor neuron differentiation between the somatic and the autonomic nervous systems. That will be on your exam. A single lower motor neuron extends from the CNS to skeletal muscle fibers. The cell bodies in the brainstem of the spinal cord, has a myelinated axon with a large diameter, and it releases the acetylcholine, as is always the case when we talk about acetylcholine, from the synaptic knob to excite the muscle fiber. And with the lower motor neurons of the autonomic nervous system uses a chain of 2 motor neurons. You know that, 1 for somatic and 2 versus autonomic. Neurons to reach the effector, and need to know that preganglionic and the postganglionic neuron here. The first is the preganglionic neuron, which is a cell body within the brainstem of the spinal cord. It's got a thin myelinated axon that projects the autonomic ganglion in the peripheral nervous system. That second ganglion, the postganglionic neuron. And it releases acetylcholine from the synaptic knob to excite the second motor neuron. And then in that second motor neuron, the postganglionic neuron, that cell body is within the autonomic ganglion. It's very thin, unmyelinated axon, projects to the cardiac muscle, smooth muscle with the glands, and it releases acetylcholine or epinephrine from the synaptic knob to either excite or inhibit the effector. So you need to know that basic info for the exam. And you will have this image on your exam for you all to identify the different components here. For your preganglionic neuron cell body and our preganglionic axon, our autonomic ganglion, and the acetylcholine here, identifying there are nicotinic receptors. Okay, this being our ganglionic neuron cell body here, and our postganglionic axon. And of course, this here would be the effector organ, like cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, or gland. And of course, it would be this release would be acetylcholine or norepinephrine. And you will not have to notice this part for the exam. The lower motor neurons, the ANS, I won't always tell you that. But that said, what advantages are there for the autonomic nervous system to use a chain of 2 neurons instead of just 1 neuron? It allows for neuronal convergence, which is multiple preganglionic neurons synapsing on 1 ganglionic neuron, and allows for neuronal divergence, branches the axon from 1 preganglionic neuron or synapsing with numerous ganglionic neurons. As far as control of the autonomic nervous system, that an autonomic nervous system is regulated by parts of the brain and the spinal cord. You will have to understand the role of the hypothalamus here. That's on the exam. Hypothalamus is crucial. It contains nuclei controlling both divisions of the autonomic nervous system. It's essential for emotional autonomic nervous system processes such as fight or flight. It can be influenced by areas of the cortex, thalamus, and limbic system. Now, the brainstem nuclei mediates visceral reflexes, like maintenance of blood pressure, and the spinal cord governs some autonomic nervous system reflexes, like defecation and urination, as controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system. And then as far as composition here, or control the autonomic functions by higher brain centers, you should definitely know that hypothalamus integrates into command center for autonomic functions involved in emotions. This diagram is not in the exam, but you should understand that component of the hypothalamus here. Now, the brainstem contains major autonomic nervous system reflex centers, and the spinal cord, of course, contains our autonomic nervous system reflex centers for defecation and urination. So what did you learn? What criterion is used to organize the nervous system into the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system? What sensory and motor components are associated with each of the two systems? What are the anatomic features that distinguish the motor neurons in the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system? And what CNS structures the integration and command center for autonomic function? And then we'll come back here shortly, trying to keep these videos nice and short for you for 15